Really glad you're here today, and honestly, what I want to talk about is something that I think is going to hit really close to home for a lot of you. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's just have a real, honest conversation about what's happening with money in America right now. Because here's the thing, if you've been feeling lately like your wallet just never seems to have enough in it, like no matter how hard you work or how carefully you try to budget, you still feel like you're constantly running on empty, I want you to know something important. You are not imagining it. This is real. This is happening, and millions of people across the country are sitting exactly where you are right now, feeling the exact same way. I've been paying close attention to what's going on out there, talking to people, reading the numbers, and honestly, the picture it's painting is pretty sobering. So today, I want to walk you through everything. What people are actually experiencing, what choices they're being forced to make, and where I think all of this is heading. My goal isn't to stress you out or leave you feeling hopeless. My goal is to give you the real picture because I truly believe that understanding what's going on is the first step toward figuring out what to do about it. All right, let's get into it. When broke stops being a figure of speech. So first, let's just acknowledge something. When most of us say, I'm broke, we usually mean it kind of loosely, right? Like, I can't afford to go out this weekend, I'm broke. But what I'm seeing now is different. People aren't using that word loosely anymore. They mean it literally. They are genuinely, seriously running out of money. Not just fun money, not just vacation money, but the money they need for the basic stuff. Food, transportation, healthcare, a roof over their head. And what makes this particularly tough to watch is that this isn't just happening to people who were already struggling. This is hitting middle-class families who did everything right. People who went to school, got decent jobs, bought homes, built savings, they're feeling it too. Even people on the higher end of the income spectrum are noticing things shifting in ways they haven't experienced before. So this isn't a story about one group of people failing. This is a much bigger, much more widespread situation, and it deserves our full attention. Let me start with something that really surprised me when I first heard about it, and that's what's happening with health insurance. The health insurance situation is getting really ugly. Okay, so raise your hand if you've ever looked at your health insurance premium and thought, what exactly am I paying for here? Because a growing number of Americans, and we're talking millions of people, are actually answering that question by saying, you know what? Not worth it, and they are canceling their coverage altogether. Now here's what makes this particularly striking. It's not just lower income folks who feel like they can't afford it. We're seeing doctors, actual physicians, walking away from their personal health insurance plans because when they sit down and do the math, the numbers just don't add up. Think about that for a second. People who work in healthcare, who understand better than anyone what can happen if you don't have coverage, are deciding that the insurance itself has become too expensive to justify. And why? Because the deductibles have become absolutely astronomical. We're talking about people who are paying hundreds of dollars every single month in premiums, and then when they actually need to use their insurance, they've got to hit a deductible of $5,000, $6,000, sometimes even $8,000 or more before their coverage actually kicks in. So effectively, unless something really catastrophic happens to you, you're paying all that money every month and getting very little in return for it. Think about what that means for a family that's already stretched thin. You're shelling out, let's say, $600, $700, $800 a month for a plan. You go to the doctor for something routine, and you find out that because your deductible hasn't been met, you're paying that bill out of pocket anyway. So what exactly was the point of the insurance? People are asking that question, and a lot of them are coming to a really difficult conclusion. The system as it currently exists just isn't working for them. And the ripple effects of that are going to be huge. When people skip preventive care because they can't afford it, small health issues turn into big health issues. And big health issues become financial catastrophes. It's a cycle that's incredibly hard to break out of, and right now, we're setting a lot of families up to fall right into it. Let's talk about housing because wow. Okay, if the health insurance conversation made you uncomfortable, buckle up because housing might be the most shocking piece of this whole puzzle. There was a time, and I know some of you remember this, when buying a house felt like a reasonable goal. You'd save up, you'd find something you loved, you'd get a mortgage, and yeah, it would be a stretch, but it was doable. A mortgage payment of around $1,200 or $1,300 a month, that was something a working family could realistically manage. Now, I'm seeing average mortgage payments of $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and in some markets, even higher than that. And this isn't for mansions. This is for regular homes in regular neighborhoods. A normal house that a family wants to live in, raise their kids in, build a life in, and the monthly payment has become completely out of reach for a massive portion of the population. What happened? Well, you've got a combination of factors all hitting at the same time. Home prices went way up during the pandemic years. Then interest rates climbed sharply as the Fed tried to cool things down. So now you've got expensive homes and expensive borrowing costs colliding with each other, and the result is that monthly payment numbers that would have seemed absolutely insane just 5 or 6 years ago are now just the reality. And here's something I think about that doesn't get discussed enough. Even for people who already own homes and locked in a lower rate years ago, they're still feeling the pressure. Property taxes have gone up. Homeowners insurance has gone up, in some states dramatically. Maintenance costs have gone up because labor and materials are more expensive. So owning a home has become more expensive across the board, not just for new buyers. Meanwhile, renting isn't the safe alternative it used to be either. Rents in most major cities and even a lot of smaller ones have climbed to levels that are really hard to stomach. So whether you own or rent, housing is eating a bigger and bigger chunk of people's budgets, leaving less and less for everything else. The gas pump is basically robbing us at this point. Alright, let's talk gas, because this one hits everybody. Doesn't matter where you fall on the income spectrum, if you drive a car, you're feeling this. We've seen some genuinely jaw-dropping numbers at the pump recently. In places like Los Angeles, prices have been pushing past $6 a gallon, Washington State crossing over $5. And this isn't something that crept up slowly over months. We saw one of the biggest single-day spikes in recent memory, driven by a whole mix of geopolitical tension and supply issues coming together at once. Now, $6 a gallon sounds like just a number until you actually think through what it means for daily life. Let me share something a friend of mine told me recently that I think illustrates it perfectly. His wife asked him to run to the grocery store. Simple request, right? Pick up a few things for dinner. But here's the thing, they live in a more rural area and the nearest grocery store is about 35 minutes away. Normally, that's just the reality of where they live. You factor it in, you plan around it. But on this particular day, there was construction on the route, so he had to take a detour. What would have been about an hour and 10 minutes of driving total ended up being closer to an hour and a half. So he's sitting in the car, doing the math in his head. The gas for this trip, the wear and tear on the vehicle, the time spent, time that could have gone toward working, resting, being with family. And he starts asking himself, is cooking at home actually saving us money when you factor all of this in? And that's a question more and more people are wrestling with. We've always been told that cooking at home is the financially responsible choice, and in many cases it still is, but when gas is this expensive and distances are what they are, that calculation gets a lot murkier. Now, if you're finding value in this conversation and it's making you think, I'd really love it if you took a second right now to hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find these discussions when they need them. And if you're not subscribed yet, come join the community. Drop a comment below and let me know what part of this is hitting closest to home for you. I read them and your experiences help shape what I cover next. Okay, let's keep going. Grocery prices, when did food become a luxury? Speaking of cooking at home, let's talk about what's actually happening at the grocery store because it is genuinely shocking. I saw a video clip recently that I can't stop thinking about. Someone was at Whole Foods just browsing the produce section, picked up a fruit tray, looked at the price tag, and had to put it back down. That fruit tray? $40. And when you looked at the price per pound, it was over $10 per pound for fruit. Fruit, something that grows on trees, $10 a pound. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, that's Whole Foods. That's always been expensive. And fair point. But here's why that moment stuck with me. It's representative of a broader trend that we're seeing across all types of grocery stores. The prices at your regular supermarket, your Kroger, your local chain, they've all moved significantly. What you used to be able to pick up for $100 is now $140, $150, sometimes more. The specific numbers might differ depending on where you shop, but the direction is the same everywhere. And fresh produce, the stuff that's supposed to be part of a healthy diet, often seems to be leading the way in price increases. So you've got this really cruel irony where eating healthy, which is supposed to be the responsible, smart choice for your family's well-being, is increasingly becoming a privilege that not everyone can afford. School lunches, yes, even this is being cut. Here's one that I think deserves way more attention than it's getting, and it really got to me when I first read about it. More than 2/3 of schools across the United States are now saying they cannot afford to keep offering free or reduced price lunches to students. Let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about children, kids who go to school every day, who are supposed to be focused on learning and growing, and the schools that serve them are saying, we can't cover the cost of feeding them anymore. These free and reduced lunch programs have been a lifeline for millions of families. Parents who are already stretched beyond their limits have been able to send their kids to school, knowing that at least one solid meal during the day was covered. And now that safety net is showing serious cracks. And it's not just about whether a meal is free or not, it's also about what that meal looks like. Healthier options, more fruits, more vegetables, better protein choices, cost more to provide. So even in schools that can keep their programs running, there's pressure to cut corners on nutrition because better food comes with a bigger price tag. I want you to think about what this means long term. Kids who aren't properly fed can't focus. They can't learn as effectively. They're tired, they're distracted, and through no fault of their own, they're being disadvantaged in ways that could follow them for years. This is one of those consequences of the economic squeeze that doesn't make the front page very often, but it matters enormously. Credit cards, buy now, pay later, and the debt spiral. Let's shift gears and talk about something that I think is one of the clearest signs that things have gotten really serious: how people are paying for everyday necessities. Credit card debt in this country has hit record levels, and not in the way where people are loading up their cards to go on trips or buy new gadgets. I mean, people are putting groceries on credit cards. They're putting gas on credit cards, basic utilities, everyday expenses that their paychecks are no longer fully covering. And what happens when those credit cards get maxed out? That's where things get really interesting, and not in a good way. Buy now, pay later services have exploded in popularity. Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm, these platforms have been around for a while, and they were originally positioned as a way to split up big purchases. Want a new couch? Spread it over 4 payments. Going to a concert? Break it up. But that's not how they're being used anymore. People are using buy now, pay later to buy groceries at Walmart, to stock up at Costco, to cover a Sam's Club run. Think about what that means. When you're financing a grocery trip the same way someone else might finance a television, something has gone fundamentally wrong with the math of people's daily lives. And the credit score data is bearing this out. We're seeing scores dropping, not just for people at the lower end of the income scale, but for people who are considered financially stable. Higher income earners who always paid off their cards in full every month are now carrying balances, paying the minimum, letting interest accumulate. That's a really telling sign, because here's what I know from watching economic cycles over the years. When people start making decisions like that, prioritizing immediate survival over long-term financial health, it tells you they're not doing it by choice. They're doing it because they've run out of alternatives. What about people who are doing okay? Now, I want to make sure I'm being fair and complete here, because this isn't a story where only one group of people is feeling the pressure. Let me walk through what's actually happening across different income levels, because it's nuanced. For lower income households, the crisis is most acute and most immediate. We're talking about families who are skipping meals, choosing between paying a bill and buying groceries, and making the kind of daily trade-offs that most of us don't even want to imagine. For middle-income families, the ones who feel like they should be okay but don't, the pressure is coming from everywhere simultaneously. The mortgage or rent that's taken up a much bigger share of income, the car payment, the insurance, the groceries, the utilities, each one of those has gone up, and when they all go up at the same time, even a household that earns a decent income can find itself with almost nothing left over at the end of the month. Sometimes less than nothing. Now, higher income earners, and I want to be careful here because I'm not trying to play the world's tiniest violin, but they're feeling it too, just in different ways. Their investment portfolios might be weathering the storm okay, depending on how things are positioned, but they're running businesses where customers aren't spending the way they used to. Their expensive discretionary habits, the nice restaurants, the travel, the premium experiences, have all gotten noticeably more expensive. And while they can still afford those things, they're getting less value for their money, and some of them are cutting back in ways they never expected to. So across all 3 of these groups, there's a common thread. The money just doesn't go as far as it used to. And the gap between what things cost and what people can comfortably afford has widened significantly. The hidden costs nobody talks about enough. I want to spend a minute on something that I feel like gets glossed over in a lot of these economic conversations, and that's the hidden indirect costs of everything being more expensive. Take car maintenance, for example. When money gets tight, one of the first things people delay is taking their car in for service. That oil change, that brake inspection, that tire rotation, those things get pushed back. I'll do it next month. Except next month there's another bill that needs attention, and the car maintenance gets pushed again and again, until eventually the small thing that would have cost a couple $100s to fix has turned into a major repair that costs thousands. I've seen this pattern play out so many times, and it's heartbreaking because it's so preventable, but when you're just trying to keep the lights on and food on the table, the car gets deprioritized. Same thing happens with home maintenance. That small roof leak you've been meaning to get looked at, If you ignore it long enough, you're not looking at a small repair anymore. You're looking at water damage, mold, structural issues, things that escalate dramatically in cost the longer they go unaddressed. And then there's the mental and emotional cost of all of this, which I don't think we talk about nearly enough. The constant stress of financial pressure is genuinely exhausting. It affects your sleep, your relationships, your ability to focus at work, your health. People who are worried about money aren't just struggling financially, they're struggling emotionally and physically too. And that toll is real, even if it doesn't show up in any economic data. The vacation question, are we allowed to still want nice things? Okay, I want to take a slight detour here because I think this is actually an important conversation to have. When times are tough economically, there's often this cultural message that says you shouldn't be spending money on anything that isn't strictly necessary. And I understand where that comes from. But I also think it's worth pushing back on a little bit. People still want to take vacations. They still want to go out to dinner occasionally. They still want to buy something that makes them happy. And you know what? That's human. That's normal. That's not irresponsible, within reason. The problem is that even these smaller, more modest pleasures have gotten significantly more expensive. Airline tickets are up, hotel rates are up, restaurant prices are up, so the occasional treat that used to be genuinely accessible to middle-class families has become something that requires real deliberation and sacrifice. And that matters because there's a quality of life dimension to all of this that's easy to overlook when we're only talking about the basics. People aren't just struggling to cover necessities, they're also feeling the loss of the things that made life feel enjoyable and worth working hard for. And that erosion of joy and spontaneity adds to the overall sense of frustration and hopelessness that so many people are experiencing. I'm not saying anyone should go into debt for a vacation. I'm saying it's worth acknowledging that the conversation is more complex than just spend less on extras. For a lot of families, the extras have already been cut. They've been cut and cut and cut, and there's not much left to trim. If this conversation is resonating with you, if you're nodding along and recognizing pieces of your own situation, please take a moment to hit that like button. It means more than you know, and it tells me that this kind of honest, real conversation is something you want more of. Subscribe if you haven't already and leave me a comment. Tell me your city, tell me what you're seeing at your local grocery store, tell me how things feel in your neighborhood. These conversations are how we all feel a little less alone in this. Drawing parallels to 2007 and why that should get our attention. Now I want to get a little historical with you for a minute because I think context really matters here. Those of us who were adults and paying attention in 2007 remember what the months leading up to the financial crisis felt like. And here's the thing, it didn't feel like a crisis at first. It felt like a slow accumulation of pressures and warning signs that most people were hoping would just resolve themselves somehow. People were falling behind on bills but telling themselves they'd catch up. Car payments were being skipped, mortgages were being stretched, people were quietly hoping that the bank had so many repossession cases on their hands that they'd never get around to coming for their particular vehicle or property. Sound familiar? Because I'm seeing those same patterns playing out right now. People delaying payments, people hoping situations resolve before they escalate, people making the same quiet, private calculations that millions of Americans were making in 2007 before everything came apart. Now, I want to be careful here not to just say this is going to be 2008 all over again and leave it at that, because the situation is both similar and different in important ways. The banking system is in better shape in some respects. There are different regulatory structures in place, but the consumer side of the equation, the everyday financial reality for working families, has a lot of worrying echoes. And one of the key similarities is this. In 2007, a lot of people didn't realize how widespread the problem was until suddenly they did. Because when your neighbor isn't paying their mortgage, you don't know about it. When your coworker is carrying $20,000 in credit card debt, they're not announcing it at the office. These things happen quietly, individually, privately. And then one day the data catches up and everyone realizes it was everywhere all along. The jobs picture adding fuel to the fire. We can't have this conversation without talking about what's happening with employment, because that's really the foundation underneath all of this. There's been a lot of headline-level noise about jobs numbers, but I want to talk about what's happening beneath the surface, because the headline numbers don't always tell the full story. Yes, there are jobs being created, but there are also a significant number of people who are losing positions, being laid off in waves across different industries, watching their hours get cut, or finding that the new job they landed after losing their old one pays considerably less. When income goes down while prices go up, the math is brutal. You can cut your budget, but there's only so much cutting you can do before you hit bone. And a lot of families are already well past that point. There's also been an interesting shift in how people are working. More side gigs, more freelance work, more people trying to piece together income from multiple sources because one job isn't cutting it anymore. And while I think that entrepreneurial spirit is genuinely admirable, it also comes with instability, inconsistency, and the kind of financial uncertainty that makes it really hard to plan for the future. So, when does it get better? Let's be honest. All right, I know some of you came to this video hoping I'd end with, but here's why everything's going to be fine very soon. And I wish I could give you that. I really do. The honest answer is that I think things are going to get worse before they get better. Not because I enjoy saying that, I absolutely don't. But because I think you deserve honesty rather than false comfort, and I think the data and the patterns we're seeing support that conclusion. When I look at where we are and where the trajectory seems to be heading, I think we're probably looking at getting through most of the difficulty in 2026 and possibly into 2027 before we really start to see meaningful, sustained improvement. Some people are a little more optimistic than that. Some are more pessimistic. But that's my honest read based on what I'm tracking. And here's why I think that matters, because if you go into this believing it's going to snap back in a month or two, you might not make the preparations and adjustments that could really help you weather the next period. But if you understand that this is likely a longer road, you can start thinking strategically about how to protect yourself as much as possible during the difficult stretch. What can we actually do? Let's talk practically. Okay, I want to spend some time here because I don't want to just lay out a bunch of problems without talking about the practical side of things. Here are some thoughts on how real families can try to navigate this period, and I want to be clear, I know these aren't magic solutions, but they're real, actionable things that can help. Rethink your fixed expenses. The things you pay every single month, subscriptions, insurance plans, membership fees, are worth auditing with fresh eyes. Not because you're definitely paying for things you don't need, but because our circumstances change and our bills don't always change with them. There might be coverage you're paying for that no longer matches your actual life. Build food flexibility. This sounds basic, but becoming more flexible about what you cook and eat can make a meaningful difference. Being willing to buy what's on sale, working with seasonal produce, getting comfortable with a wider variety of proteins, these things can help stretch a grocery budget without sacrificing nutrition. Have the hard conversations. If you're struggling, chances are people around you are too. Whether it's family members, friends, or even coworkers, having honest conversations about financial reality can help you find collective solutions. Maybe you carpool. Maybe you do a meal swap, maybe you just share information about good deals and resources in your area. Community matters more in hard times. Protect your credit if you possibly can. I know this is easier said than done, but doing everything possible to avoid letting accounts go into default, even if it means making minimum payments or calling creditors to ask for hardship arrangements, can protect you from a much more difficult recovery down the road. Don't forget about your mental health. Financial stress is real, serious stress. It has physical effects. Don't try to white-knuckle your way through it without any support. Talk to someone you trust. Use free resources if professional help isn't affordable right now. Your mental and emotional well-being is part of your overall resilience, and it deserves attention too. A quick word on the bigger picture. I also want to say something that I feel is important from a bigger picture perspective. What we're experiencing right now isn't just a personal failure on the part of individual households. This is a systemic issue. And while there are absolutely things individuals can and should do to protect themselves, I don't want anyone watching this to walk away feeling like their struggle is their fault. Wages haven't kept pace with costs. Healthcare has become prohibitively expensive. Housing has become largely inaccessible for a new generation of buyers. These are structural problems that have been building for a long time, and they require structural solutions. That doesn't mean you're helpless, far from it. But it does mean that the difficulty you're experiencing is real, it's shared, and it's not simply the result of not working hard enough or not being smart enough with your money. I think that's important to say because shame is one of the most isolating things there is. And when people feel ashamed about their financial situation, they often make it worse by avoiding it, by not asking for help, by pretending everything is fine when it isn't. If this video helps even a few people feel less alone and more willing to face their situation head-on, then it's done something valuable. The road ahead, staying informed together. Here's my commitment to you. I'm going to keep covering this stuff. I'm going to keep digging into the data, talking to people, watching the trends, and bringing you the most honest and complete picture I can of what's actually happening out there. Because I think one of the most important things in a moment like this is information. When you understand what's going on, really understand it, not just the sound bites, but the actual dynamics, you're in a much better position to make decisions that are right for you and your family. You can see things coming, you can prepare, you can make choices from a position of knowledge rather than fear. The situation we're in is genuinely challenging. The data is clear on that. But challenging doesn't mean hopeless and temporary. Even if temporary is a couple of years rather than a couple of months, doesn't mean permanent. Economies move in cycles. They always have. There will be a recovery. The question is really about how we position ourselves to be in as good a shape as possible when that recovery comes. And listen, before I wrap up, if you've made it this far, I genuinely appreciate you spending this time with me today. This stuff matters, and the fact that you want to understand it, that you're willing to sit with uncomfortable truths rather than look away, that says a lot about you. So thank you for that. Hit that like button if this was valuable to you. Drop a comment and tell me what you're seeing in your own community, your town, your city, your neighborhood. Are prices at your local store noticeably higher than a year ago? Are people in your circle talking about this stuff? I want to hear from you because your real-world perspective is invaluable and it genuinely shapes the conversations we have here. Subscribe if you haven't yet because there is a lot more coming and I want to make sure you don't miss any of it. Every single update, every trend, every development, I'm going to be right here breaking it down in a way that actually makes sense. We're in this together, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care of yourselves out there.